Craig never asked for this.
I gotta keep up the tradition every time you come in here.
He never
you
wanted to unleash his recordings.
Need to unleash his. Hang on, hold on. That sounds dirty. I don't like that. Sounds dirty.
You're the only one who thinks that.
Always watching.
Never participating.
God. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Actual Play Broadcast. Today we are doing a review. Of Wrath and Glory.
Yeah, full disclosure, obviously this is for our 40k game. We wanted to play Death Watch at first, and then we didn't.
We'll have an entire conversation on that.
Oh, we definitely will. But like, I'm gonna full disclosure, Wrath and Glory was we were making characters, and then I said, never mind, let's try this one.
And I
Switch
think
gears, backtrack, let's go, U-turn, go.
I think we're better for it.
Yeah, I think
I'd
so.
say
Yeah.
so. But like Damiani said, we are reviewing Wrath and Glory. Wrath and Glory is the 40k game. There were some slight alterations in homebrew that we did to play chapters in the 30k universe, not 30k universe, but in the time of the 31st millennium rather than the 41st. And a quick question for you, Damiani. Did you find those rules and add them, or did you make those up?
So I kind of looked up a general baseline because I was like, okay, surely somebody's tried to run 30k. And it didn't really find that. Instead, I found people who wanted to run similar flavors of essentially homebrew chapters, and from there I kind of got like this is what the community thinks is all right, I'm going to edit this to my own means.
Okay.
So I started out with finding stuff and then tailored it more personally.
Okay.
But 40k
Which is why we
a-
had that mix up in the beginning about multi-attack and charge.
Yeah.
That was all me, baby.
Wrath and Glory is a D6 dice pool system that you don't have to use special snowflake dice for, but I imagine that those exist.
I mean, probably.
They do, absolutely. I think it's, like you said, you don't need them.
Yeah.
I think it's beneficial to have them if you're going to be playing at the table. But if you're using a dice bot, it's pretty straightforward. We recommend Wrathbot. That's what we used.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It crashed on us less than Dice Maiden does, but we abuse the fuck out of Dice Maiden. Let's be honest.
Dice Maiden also gets used like a back alley horse, so
Yeah.
How many servers is it in?
I mean, a lot. A lot of them.
A lot of them. Most of them.
Pretty much any server that does tabletop RPG stuff probably has Dice Maiden, if not Avray. It's like a 50-50.
Or Masquerade bot or whatever.
Well, I'm saying in general, if you're doing things that are very specific like that, because there are so many D20 games have the corner on the market.
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, Dice Maiden works for Shadowrun, Percentile, a bunch of stuff.
Works
You
for
just have to know
L5R.
how to. Yeah, you just have to know how to tell it what to do.
But dice pool system, we succeeds on 5 and 6s. A 6, it's 6 that causes the Wrath
6 is your
to be rolled.
glory. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a D6 dice pool system. There's not a whole lot to talk about there. If you've ever played the 40k tabletop war game, you'll get it.
It feels pretty similar, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
1s are oopsie daisies, 6s are meth. I mean, math.
Only for you.
Uh,
The great part is Brandon didn't have to roll to charge, which is both great and also kind of sad.
It's true. We could not see Brandon's legendary charges. Really, they would have busted my campaign.
I started looking into the distance. I want you to know that. I turned and just looked out my window.
I was there all those years ago. Brandon started getting the decor, and then legendary was the failed charges.
Brandon, is that your third Snake Eyes this game? Why, yes it was. Were all of them on charges? Yes, yes they were.
3-inch charge, by the way.
3-inch
charge still failed.
Yeah, it's great. It's math. That's why I play tanky characters for a reason. I almost never have to roll my AC.
It's also the real cream on the top of it all was getting that really awesome book that we got to use for 2 months. Or maybe 3 months. Didn't get to play any games with it.
Games Workshop, I'm addressing this next statement to you.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
There is not a physical, probable way for you to be able to say, hey, we're going to be publishing this book that has an expansion on the rules, and then not even 4 months later, put out an entire new edition. There is no way you did not go into that situation, look at that, and go, that will scam some people.
I mean, if it makes you feel better, Brandon, they're probably about to do that to Emperor's Children.
I collect their models and I paint their models. They get that. I buy their plastic. I refuse to buy their paper.
I think we're getting a little off track here.
I mean, it's still 40K related.
Yeah,
you're not wrong, but
and I'm also segueing it.
That's fair.
So that is something about the game is a lot of the mechanics felt like they were ripped and appropriately applied to a tabletop RPG. Things like mortal wounds, how you go into charge. Attacking's a little clunky, but we'll get into that. In my opinion.
So attacking is smooth once we got the stopped being stupid and not doing the rules correctly. It's just you roll compare to defense, excess goes into ED. It's simple. We just fucked it up for the first 2 sessions.
What I'm referring to is how their action economy in combat works. Full actions.
That's weird.
Yeah. Because in the tabletop RPG, you do not have a attack rating. You do not have an amount of attacks that you do. You can do multiple attacks. You have a specific penalty when you go to do that. But even then, that penalty is a little weird because, it's odd. So, but building a character is simple. You go grab a template and you customize based on how much XP the GM gives you.
Mm-hmm. And granted, we started pretty high, and going into Space Marine, it may skew our experience on that a little bit, but
absolutely. I do want to ask from a GM perspective, were there any rules that you were like, man, I hope I don't have to bring this up?
I mean, nothing particularly. Obviously, I got hung up on a few parts, partially because just I do that, and then partially because I didn't expect certain rules so quickly or what have you. There is some stuff that I wish that they had covered. For example, I wish in Church of Steel, their vehicle supplement, they gave everybody flyers instead of just putting in a Valkyrie and orc jets. Past that, it felt like the rules were generally smooth and easy to understand once you got into them. So I didn't feel there was anything that was I hope we don't do this.
In the what is it called? Steel Arsenal, the vehicle one?
Church of Steel.
Church of Steel. My question is, do they have detailed rules out for vehicle combat or ship-to-ship combat?
They have it for vehicle combat. Supposedly back when it was first put out by the different company.
Cubicle 7,
Forgive me,
believe.
I don't remember which companies did which. But back before it was acquired by the people who have it now, there
Cubicle 7.
was there was a book for doing ship-to-ship combat. There isn't now because they changed up the system enough that just doesn't work.
Okay.
And supposedly it is one of the splats that's going to be coming out soon. TM.
Gotcha. No, I was just curious because
that's why the very end felt a little awkward because I was having to make stuff up on the fly about like where you guys getting out. It felt like there needed to be some interaction there, but A, you guys didn't bring any Space Marines with you, which I thought you would. And B, you're working with a crew that is not necessarily friendly to you, so I was trying to, and then just not having the rules for ship-to-ship stuff. It was me pulling a lot out of my ass, which is probably why it felt awkward. At least it did to me.
And like that's a thing whenever I see, because you don't generally have to worry about ship-to-ship combat unless you're running a specific kind of campaign in your typical medieval fantasy. You only kind of have to worry about that when you're looking at modern fantasy. When you go a little bit higher in the fantasy or a little further in the future, that's when that stuff becomes really prevalent.
Yeah. Now, granted, there was definitely vehicle to vehicle, and it scaled to vehicle to infantry pretty easily. So, like, what they have put out works. In fact, the whole plot device of it, the Thunderhawk being downed but not like super damaged, was actually by by the book.
Interesting.
So, like, because it got a critical that just disrupted the engines.
But when playing the game felt fine. I think that now would be the time to address our original choice. Originally,
yeah. Well, actually, first off, before we go too far into that, I want to do what we did for like 5e. What are your guys' experience with Warhammer? I have played most of the FFG lines. I'm actually even currently in a Rogue Trader game. This is the first time I've GM'd, but I'm just new to GMing in general. That said, this is the first time, obviously, I've played Wrath and Glory, and getting before that, so I am fairly experienced with the tabletops of Warhammer.
Next to none.
Okay. Zach, what does that mean?
So I've played. Last time I played the war game was a game of 8th edition, and was not the biggest fan of the changes they made. I learned and cut my teeth on 7th. And I've dabbled a little bit. I'm currently looking at getting into Blood Bowl. I've played some of the video games, and tabletop wise, I own 2 Dark Heresy 2nd edition books. I have not gotten to use them.
Yeah,
understandable.
And I've looked at the Death Watch books before briefly, as well as the Champions of Chaos books, but never really been able to fully dive into them. Haven't really had an opportunity to play in a proper Warhammer tabletop campaign until now.
My experience with the RPGs for anything GW related, so it'd be Age of Sigmar or 40K, next to none. I've looked through the books before, but the players I had when I was looking at those. It's like, we're gonna play 5th edition. I was like, I guess we're playing 5th edition. As for the war game itself, I play a specific kind of way. I play melee, I get up all in your face. I'm generally looking to wipe you off the board. But I've played an amount of 7th edition before it became 8th, played an okay amount of that before I got tired of it, came back for like 9th or 10th, I don't remember. And, you know, it's okay. I like the model hobby of the aspect, but I lived with, at the time, 4 individuals who played Warhammer, 3 of which were decent at it, 2 of which were longtime players, one of which currently hosts and organizes tournaments on the East Coast.
Ah,
Yeah, if we're talking about war game. Similarly, I have played 8th to current edition pretty regularly.
well, I guess I have the longest experience of everyone out of all 4 of us.
You old.
I started off when I was 12. I started in 3rd edition. Played through 4th, played through 5th, played through 6th, played through 7th. Attempted to start 8th, but then that's when life kind of got in the way. Came back in pre-10th, and that's just the tabletop game.
Yeah, well, we're primarily focused. At least my question is, what is everybody's?
Let him go on.
No. This is the kind of like the overall of my 40K experience. So in terms of the tabletop game, pre-10th was earlier this year. The 40K tabletop games started off with Dark Heresy 1st edition. Played that almost for a year. Granted, it was kind of awkward because I was only like 15 at the time. And I had to get dropped off by my parents to go play at the game shop with these people. And it was kind of funny because one of the people I later ended up playing Pathfinder Society with for a good 5 years of my life. Back onto the 40K side, though, did a little bit of Rogue Trader. Did a short stint of Deathwatch. Short stint of Deathwatch was probably about 4 sessions. Didn't really get any chance to look into Dark Heresy 2, though I was kind of excited that they came up with a second version. Wrath and Righteous would be my most recent edition of playing into the 40K stuff, aside from probably looking into the Only War stuff and the Dark Crusade stuff. Followed by hearing about at my local game store actively Dark Heresy 3, but it's a different game. I don't, for whatever reason, it's escaping my mind right now.
Imperium Maledictum, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, it's one of the new ones. Yeah. That's supposed to try to capture the vibe of the old FFG.
Right. So, I'm 32? So technically, I've been into the 40K realm for roughly 20 years now.
Fair.
But with like that's everyone's experience with it. Was there a reason that was there a stated reason in mind for going to try to do Deathwatch first?
Deathwatch had a fan-made supplement that specifically covered 30K.
Okay.
It was a lot less work and balancing on my end to just make that happen.
Space Marines makes sense.
It was a fan-made supplement that I thought was actually made fairly well. Looking at it, called the Good, the Bad, and the Alpha Legion.
But we all ended up not sticking with Deathwatch.
No.
Yeah, we were sitting there all gathered together for a session 0 like we generally do, trying to work on characters, and it was pretty much every step of the way having to stop and be like, well, what is this? Well, what does that mean? And go search up a thing to get an answer to the question. Find the thing, and then in its description, we get another question. Well, what the fuck is that? And we spent a good, almost 2 hours, I think.
Yeah.
It sounds about
Just
right.
jumping around in the book. And I eventually was like, why aren't we doing this in Wrath and Glory? I haven't played it. I don't know shit about Wrath and Glory, but it is apparently like the more go-to nowadays.
And
eventually I caved and just said, this is getting more work than it's worth. Let's look at Wrath and Glory.
yeah, let's talk about Deathwatch briefly. I have personal compunctions against the original publisher. So,
Saying so. Color me shocked.
Yeah, for folks that are unaware and the uninitiated, I have a heavy bias against any RPG made by, developed by, or published by Fantasy Flight Games. Now, this has nothing to do with Fantasy Flight as a company. I do enjoy their card games, but they do not know how to design a book or an RPG for their existence. So much so, as we have recently found out that Asmodee Group agrees with me, and they are no longer in charge of RPGs. They'll move that all over to Edge Studios.
Yeah, they did that a couple years ago, apparently. It was such a subtle change. We didn't hear about it, but we also don't regularly patronize their online store, so we weren't really aware of it at the time, but we were recording another episode that may or may not be out before this.
No, I'm releasing them all in a line.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So that's for another series that Brandon and I are starting. But yeah, all their stuff is Edge Studios now. So that's telling to some degree.
Including their precious baby Genesis.
Yes. That was the shocker to me.
See, I have very neutral feelings on Genesis. I know I'm somewhat unique there.
We're going to have a conversation later about that. Don't you worry.
Indeed. But yeah, and so FFG, they originally had the license with Games Workshop to produce RPG materials for the Warhammer 40,000 universe. And I mean, they had several game lines: Rogue Trader, Deathwatch, Only War. What was it? Champion? No. Black Crusade.
Yeah, okay. I was trying to. I know what you're talking about.
It was Only War, Black Crusade, Rogue Trader,
Dark Heresy,
Deathwatch, and Dark Heresy.
Yeah.
Those are the big 6.
They all mechanically functioned the same way. They were all percentile systems and such, but because they were all at different power levels, they had some variance in the rules and some changes in their progression systems and such.
Yeah, and they few mechanics changed.
Yeah,
it did at least attempt to try and say if you were building from one system to the next, you could adapt it this way, but not always.
It was clunky at
even
best.
play. Yeah, exactly.
Because even just going from Dark Heresy First Edition to Dark Heresy Second Edition was
Well, that was effectively a different game at that point, but like going from Dark Heresy to Rogue Trader, that was actually a significant power jump between the two systems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that is part of the reason why we jumped from doing that, because I don't want to stay on this too long, because we didn't play in it. And it's because the book was this is why you need to have someone go through and look at your book and go, hey, this is easy to navigate and I don't have to jump 300 pages at a time to reference a piece of material.
Yeah, that's my probably biggest complaint as playing in Rogue Traders. Just That's my biggest complaint across a lot of systems. Editing is an underutilized skill.
It's an art.
It's my complaint about Wrath and Glory.
Well, we'll get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wrath and Glory's editing wasn't perfect, but it was
It was.
substantially better than Deathwatch.
I see what they were going for in Wrath and Glory's editing style. Like they grouped here's species, then here's archetypes. When I thought that like it really could have been better to organize it in a different way. That wasn't whatever the fuck they tried.
Yeah. But let's jump over to the actual gameplay portion. So, for those of you who did not listen to the previous episodes for Wrath and Glory, spoilers for the campaign. Well, short adventure.
I've already spoiled. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, what? Okay. I mean, if you're just wanting to know, if you just want to see a review about a game, you don't care about the story that followed with it. I understand that. That's fine. You want to know what
we might have some weird stuff about what our experience in the story and then how the mechanics work.
Yeah, I feel like if you're gonna do that, you really should just listen to the story so that you have at least like some context to why we review the way we do.
Yes, let us farm your viewership. Yes.
Sure.
But the gameplay overall was, I'm going to say good, because it did flow very similar to how playing 40K the war game functions. You're rolling a bunch of dice and you're trying to get hits, and those hits do a thing and they do damage. You win, big number go up, profit.
Yeah. Here, I maybe this is just because I was on the GM side. I thought it went better than most systems, even something like Shadowrun. Combat was a lot smoother because instead of having to, I roll dice, so you roll dice, so I roll dice, so you roll dice, like a lot of systems tend to do. We had some target numbers. You guys got to roll twice, and then if I had an enemy that could do it, that could soak, I rolled once, and then we had straight done the math. And so things went really quickly once we got the hang of it, and I appreciated that.
In that vein, it is definitely a more simplified flow, is the way I'm going to phrase it. More simplified, or at least streamlined, and yeah, definitely feels like it's a pretty nice back and forth versus nitty gritty semantics in some regards, especially like how sometimes Shadowrun's rules engagement works or mechanics engagement works.
Yeah,
I'll say that Shadowrun is a crunchy system. This is mid-core, or a term I've been amusing myself with, chewy. Could you ignore maneuvers and stuff that you could do in combat and still do okay in this? Yes. Is it still very valuable to use some of these different maneuvers and options in combat? Absolutely. There's a lot of fiddly bits that you can take advantage of, but if you just want to say, I shoot the guy and then roll the dice, you're not crippling yourself by doing that. So you can take it very casually.
Mm-hmm.
I would say my own play experience, it was pretty enjoyable. I sat down, had an idea of what I wanted to do, and I fairly quickly found the means to do that. And, well, I dare say it was effective.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
You found a pretty good combo there.
Yeah.
Like, sure, you really didn't do much out of combat, but like in combat, you were very.
We were playing a combat game. We weren't really doing a bunch of puzzle solving and social shit. This was traitor bad, kill them all.
Well, and true. Here's the thing, like, and this is why I agree that this is a chewy system. but I would scoff at anyone said that it's kind of like a light system. No, it's definitely, it leans more towards crunch than rules light.
Yeah.
Because what me and Zemian and Ali were doing for our characters to do that stuff was, I have a thing I'm going to do a thing. Cool. Here's the target number, and here's your penalties. Cool. I have these 3 things that help change all of those. The fact that you can build a character that has abilities to sit there, A, to reduce the penalties they have incoming, B, give themselves additional boosts, and C, change target numbers is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Simply based on the fact that means like there's tons of rules engagement from, and like depending on how you look at things, you could say, well, I shouldn't have to engage with the rules. The rules like are there to give structure. I will politely say I understand that opinion.
I understand that opinion, but you're wrong.
I understand that opinion. However, it's engaging because you get to go, and when you make a character that's really good at shooting or really good at melee or really good at hacking, you get to go, cool, what is this character trying to do? I'm trying to swing big fuck off axe. Cool.
Mhm.
What tools do you need to do that better? I need to be able to ignore penalties. Here's tools for that. Now I need to be able to change the target number. Here's the tool for that. Oh, you took this specific weapon, so now you get a boost. Go. And that's nice. That's very nice. Because that it's rules engagement. There are plenty of things to involve yourself with those rules. I am concerned that is available only because we were at a higher level of play, and that might get lost on lower levels of play.
So, granted, we didn't play on lower levels of play, but as somebody who had to like put all of the mechanics together and whatnot, I had to do a lot of looking over and seeing how things worked at different levels because sometimes I was going to throw something at you that had stuff. And I think one thing I really want to compliment Wrath and Glory on is making its talents and abilities scale. Like, just from a viewpoint of you do things according to half or 1 or 2 times your rank thing, made it really easy for you to get value that is appropriate at any point in the game from your talents. So stuff didn't just fall off or be OP in the beginning.
So it was consistent scaling throughout.
Yeah, I think it did really well at making sure that scaling was consistent.
Okay, I wasn't aware that was because I only look for like specific tools and things. I didn't.
Yeah,
do a
well,
deep
that's
dive.
why for example, in the very little homebrew that we used, which was your chapter bonuses, that's why I chose you did rank stuff or half rank stuff or what have you, because that I looked at all of the talents and I looked at why they did that, and I saw how effective that was going to end up being. For example, you guys were doing a high rank game. It makes sense that you, as a world eater who has been traipsing around for a couple hundred years, cleaving people in half, should be able to hit 3 people with no penalty. You've just done it enough. But at the same time, it will still allow somebody to, at a lower, like guardsman level, be able to hit a couple of people reliably.
Yeah.
So I think the idea of using tying scaling of like talents and certain skills and stuff to rank was really smart of them to do in the system, and I really enjoyed it.
So let that be a lesson to all people that are designing an RPG. Things that scale off of a rank that you attach. Good. It's good.
Yeah, I like scaling talents because then it makes things not feel worthless to build or like I'm gimping myself in order to be good at a certain level.
But the fact that I get that there are several parts of the system that interact with one another feels nice, where a number of rules light systems are did you roll well? I don't care about anything else you got going on. Were the dice good? Dice were good? Cool, keep going. If dice weren't good, then that's when your abilities start potentially coming in or doing something.
Yeah.
And I think that is all in all a good thing. Being able to have the system be interactable from what sounds like top to bottom, and still be relatively easy to pick up and play. Mind you, did we stumble a bit? Yeah, but also understand that some of these sessions happen months apart.
Yeah,
True.
admittedly, we probably would have been a bit more coherent if we had played like back-to-back games, but I had to share this time slot with another game I'm running. So, and then scheduling is scheduling.
Yeah, that said, even with the scaling and such, I do think it is, if you have or intend to watch us playing through and considering our review, I think there should be special considerations made, because I imagine, just from our experience, that lower power level characters, lower tiered characters, the game plays very differently, because you're going to have less armor, you're going to have less resilience, you're going to have weaker weapons, probably less equipment, so on and so forth. And you're also not going to have as many talents as we got to pick out. So could you have a low powered character with unnatural ballistic skill? Yes. Are they also going to have Deadeye and all of these other things going on, and a las cannon or cracking rounds on a bolter or anything like that? No, not necessarily. So
yeah. Well, no one's gonna. Oh.
It's definitely it's definitely worth considering if you want to play at a lower level. That what we did isn't necessarily representative of what lower level play looks like. Because I will say, from the gameplay, there were a few things we encountered where it's like, why would you ever use this? Because at the power level we're at, some options are strictly bad. For example, I encountered, as the shooting character, looking at the salvo options and being able to multi-attack and reduce those penalties and such. For the most part, the salvo options are not very good for me. I did them a couple times and was like, what? Afterwards, I was just like, why would I do that? That was not worth the expenditure of ammunition. But a lower level character who doesn't have all the reductions that I have would see value in those options.
Which I still think is a neat thing with the system, is that...
Yeah. I'm not saying it like it's a bad thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right tool, right job.
Yeah.
Oh, what about you, Ollie? What was your thoughts on like combat?
Combat was definitely not too bad. At least it seemed to flow pretty darn well. Granted, at least for me, having to go back from a couple different sources and then using the compilation of what the different mechanics you can do while in combat, community guide was really helpful. Especially given the fact that I had to switch back and forth between a few different books regarding hack abilities, hack mechanics, and how do they interact with what I was trying to work with.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which I guess you pulling up the cheat sheet that we had would be a good time to talk about this. Now, mind you, Lee said this was laid out better than Deathwatch. To be fair, it's fairly easy not to trip on that bar. I don't think it was. I'm sorry. The unbiased.
No, go for it.
But it was organized decently. We still needed a cheat sheet so we could effectively reference a number of things. And even then, we were found wanting, and you can hear it in the last session, on some of the things that we needed to reference, especially like keywords.
Yeah.
Like salvo and rapid fire, brutal, unwieldy, things like that.
Yeah, so my take on that is it is better laid out than Deathwatch. And you're right, that is a bar that is buried in the ground, so it is not hard to get over it. But and I see what they were going for with we're going to try to section out things. It still made it a pain in the ass to find things. I'm sorry, if you're gonna do species, then archetype, then like talents and stuff, just you have species, group archetypes with those, the ones that are applicable. Or something like that, and put references in things, because there were so many times where I'm so glad that they had an index. Thank the gods, because it was a pain in the ass to find things otherwise.
Yeah, some games don't even get a table of contents.
Oh my god, I actually want to die when those games come around.
Oh,
games without an index or table of contents make me want to pull my eyes out of my brain.
Yeah, 100% fair on that one.
I am so angry when I come across them.
Brandon and I just talked about a game that did not have those or page numbers.
I would actually rage if I didn't even get page numbers.
It's
page numbers.
Yeah, it's considers it a self plug to go listen. I don't know. I'll be posting this to YouTube at some point as well. Listen to our RPG archaeology where we talk about Hardmaster.
Yeah.
Because oh boy. But we think there's a reason behind it. We talk about that. Not going to go over it here. One of the things that I dislike with a system is if the rule book references something and it's going to continue referencing that thing, but you can only ever find it on one page, and you could be 200 plus pages apart. If I have to stick my hand in a page, filter through the rest of the pages to the page I want to go read what is effectively 5 words that would barely constitute as a sentence, that way I know what the thing does, you fucked up. You fucked up big. And I don't count the flavor text as part of being the sentence that I need. Also, don't bury rules in your flavor text.
Yeah. Also, if you're going to tell me that I get something or there is some special quality about a class, looking at you, Artificer Armor for the Tech Marine, tell me what it is or what it does, because I actually had to look. I Googled it. I asked around. I went to the hellscape that was Reddit. Literally, it's like Tech Marine, you get Artificer Armor. Nowhere does it tell you what that is or what it does. I had to tell Ali just use a different quality armor that's newer and not invented yet to represent it being better. Like I fucking holy shit.
Yeah, that was a fun little thing.
And then use consistent or like clear vernacular, because like for example, 2-weapon fighting and multi-attack. drove me up a wall. I had to really hard stay on the track so that we could continue that session because that bothered me.
It bothers me. That was because it was one of the things that I really enjoyed doing if I'm playing a melee focused fighter. I'm either going to have sword and board or I'm going to have two weapons.
Yeah, and that's totally reasonable.
And that is reasonable, and it's a thing that you expect a lot of RPGs to have rules for.
Yep.
Some of them don't. Some of them include this game.
Sure don't.
And that was a little annoying. Because the rules that they have in place is that if you're attacking multiple targets, let me go find. I will read this entire excerpt that I put. So, where dual wielding is pointless, because why? The way that it's represented in the game, as is rules is written, because they don't clarify anything on it. So, if you have two different weapons in your hand, if both your hands filled with two different weapons, dual wielding is pointless, because when you go to attack, you attack with the same weapon twice. So why are you doing that? Why are you holding two weapons then? Because the multi-attack feature just says that you attack twice. It doesn't say that you use one weapon or not.
Yeah.
Or that you could multi-attack cross. You can only multi-attack across crowds. So that means you can only do that against crowds of people, because you have to use the same weapon against the same target. So you then have to swing to a crowd of people. So if you're fighting one big bad, you essentially lose a purchased perk for a fight, and attacking multiple times on one target would make sense. And is also a thing from the tabletop game, but in that game you have an attack rating, and you can go the first attack with chain axe, second attack chain sword.
Yeah.
But you don't get that in this game, because when you go to multi-attack, it treats it as if you're using one weapon at all times.
Yeah, so in a weird way, dual wield is useful because it still reduces your dice number penalty for the multi-attack option. But at the same time, your criticism is completely correct in that unless you're wielding two identical weapons, there is no reason to use your second weapon, because one of them is going to be better in that whatever situation you're in.
Yeah. There is no difference between you wielding two power axes and a power axe and a combat knife. There is no mechanical difference.
Because the game doesn't put in a maximum amount of attacks that you can make with a single weapon.
Yeah.
Because at the same time, you can't, because you would be gimp anybody who's two-handing something. But if you're using two weapons, you should be able to, in theory, it's fucked up.
Yeah. And that's part of one of my criticisms for the game, is that it loses some of the finesse that the game offers. You can always just say, well, you could always flavor it to where you're attacking with the power axe and the power sword, because there's not a big difference between the two. Yes, that is fair, but counter argument.
Counterpoint.
Not only is that fucking lame, let's say the situation is I have one weapon that applies a debuff, another weapon, it still does damage, but its main point is that it applies a debuff, and another weapon that does damage. So that means my first attack through applies a debuff that, let's just say, reduces their defense.
Mm-hmm.
Then the second attack comes through, because I sat there, I was just like, hey, these two items will work well together. I could sit there, lower the defense, and bring a power sword back down. It'd be great. But then we come back, and it's just like, no, you can't do any of that. You have to attack with one weapon. And your entire philosophy of how you were building that character and how you were going to do combat is now out the window. You can make the argument that it's just like, well, you should have read the rules. Did read the rules. It just doesn't specify anywhere in the rules that you can't attack with 2 weapons. It just states that when you attack with a weapon, when you multi-attack with a weapon, you treat it as that weapon profile. It doesn't outright say yes or no to attacking with 2 different weapons. I assume the system wants you to say no, don't do that, either because someone could sit there and abuse certain traits, or some other reason that I'm not in tuned on. That's fine. Just explicitly state it.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
it's one thing for the game to tell me no. It's another thing for the game to go, And
yeah, I agree.
And that's problematic. There's a part of me that is a little salty about it. We kind of just went past the rule because it's just like, that seems wrong inherently, and just let it rock, especially in that final fight.
Yeah. Because it's like, at the end of the day, it's supposed to be you guys have fun, and like it felt weirder for me to try to restrict you in that way than it did for me to just say, yeah, go for it, bro.
Yeah. Since I didn't do a whole lot in shooting or with any of the tech stuff, did you two notice similar situations on your end, or no?
I mean, like I said, the biggest weird thing for me was the salvo options. There was one fight where I had the last cannon. I used the salvo option because in the moment, I don't know what was going on in my head. I think what happened was I wasn't thinking that I could just shoot the last cannon multiple times without doing a salvo option, and so I was like, oh well, I have to do one of these. And then immediately after doing it, and I cooked the battery on it, I was sitting there looking at things while somebody else was taking their turn, and I was like, how the fuck did I do that? I'm not restricted to using salvo options when I shoot multiple times. Like, what? What was I fucking thinking? So it's like there was some weirdness there of just, because I'm used to crunchier systems where it's like, okay, you have firing modes. This doesn't really have firing modes. If it has a salvo option, you can just shoot multiple times. But it also gives you access. Well, yeah. But having the salvo rating is how you have access to the salvo options. So and when one of the salvo options is full auto, that's where I started like stroking out, being like, oh, this is how I have to attack multiple times. But no, that's not the case.
Yeah. Especially given the fact that, like, at least for Tarek in this Wrath and Glory campaign, or at least this short one shot, Tarek technically did have multiple weapons and could have done multiple attacks.
Yeah.
And it was kind of weird because that's where I had the problem of having to jump back and forth between one part of the rule set to another part of the rule set to another part of the rule set, simply because one of the tech trees or adeptus mechanicus implants effectively negated the salvo, but it seemed kind of weird with how salvo or multi-attack kind of worked with how the system was going. Oh.
Yeah, I'll admit Tarek was the weirdest of all with his just general equipment. And granted, that's just gonna be way because I don't know if you guys know this, but fucking gadget men are weird.
Yeah, well, one tech priests, tech marines, already weird across all the different 40k stuff.
Yeah, they're just gonna be weird.
Yeah, and then just running across how they were being handled with this, and trying to figure out at the very least, trying to figure out making sure that the rules interactions I was doing was precise enough was kind of weird in and of itself.
Mhm.
Like that being said, like how it felt to play the system felt good to play. There were just, minor complaints that I have
Yeah,
about how it functions.
I'm a be real. I think of the 40K systems I've played, and it's not a small amount of them. This one's my favorite so far. I haven't tried Maledictum. I want to, but barring that, this one's kind of my favorite. It encourages and balances crossplay. It has good rules for the most part that things stay relevant across the board. Scaling is nice, and with the exception of a few places where just editing is bad or things are unclear in the writing, it's fairly straightforward and understandable.
I think the biggest advantage for the system, like sure, the crossplay, as you mentioned, which is nice. The lore doesn't really support mixing factions and stuff too much, even within the Imperium. There's a threshold of believability for a group. Like they've done examples of like a Space Marine, an Inquisitor, an Imperial Guardsman, and an AdMech individual. It's like, how? Under what circumstances were these people brought together? This is such a weird hodgepodge.
Yeah, but at the same time, I feel like if a person is going for a game where anyone can play anything, it's kind of up to the GM at that point to
of
be
course.
like, this is your justification.
Of course. I would definitely, if you're going to do that, make considerations of how close you want to adhere to the setting and how believable it is this group has been pulled together. But what I was going to say is the big upside this system has compared to all of the other ones is you can play not the Imperium.
Yeah, they have Dari and
Eldar.
Orc and fucking I think the only ones they don't have are Chaos.
Effectively.
Yeah. There's supposed to be a dedicated Chaos book coming. Same thing with Soulbound. Eventually.
That's wild, actually.
But yeah, I really liked once we got into it and understood things, the flow of the game was, I think, one of the best I've experienced in a while.
Yeah. There was still a little bit of flipping around. But
yeah. That's partially, my fault. I get hung up on like a detail or something.
But you're not the one who laid out the book?
Yeah.
Well, that too.
The layout reminds me of Shadowrun, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Well, here's my defense of Shadowrun on that. Shadowrun has so much shit. There's so much shit that you have to look at.
Yeah.
Like, the rules
That's
section.
not entirely wrong. It's just I do feel like, especially because comparatively in Shadowrun with some of my characters, I don't have to reference splat books so often as I did in Wrath and Glory.
And that's fair. However, you don't typically play a mage character or a tech character, from my understanding.
I mean, he plays adepts, but
Technically, you're not wrong, but you're also 100% right.
Yeah. Adepts, you do just write the power down on your sheet and you're good to go. It's pretty straightforward. That said, I know generally as a group, we're also playing Shadowrun with cheat sheets and stuff.
Yeah.
We do what we can to minimize, but yeah, for the most part, this book was laid out okay. There were times though where I was looking for the salvo options. I was like, where the fuck is it? And I was just I must have kept passing it or something, because it's a subheader under a different section. And while it makes sense, like, oh, it's in ranged attacks in the combat section, it's like, cool, great. If I look at the bookmarks for the PDF, there isn't a bookmark for ranged attacks.
Mhm.
It's just range and movement, attacking, damage and dying, resting. It's like, okay, well, it's not down past there. So it's like, okay, go back up. And yeah, you end up having to kind of guesstimate where something is and then scroll around trying to find it. It's not great. It could have been better. Definitely not the worst I've seen by any means.
Yeah.
Um,
But that doesn't mean that it's perfect just by not being the worst.
Yeah.
yeah, and it doesn't need to be perfect. No RPG
No.
needs to be perfect because perfection is nigh impossible because people make mistakes.
To err is to be human.
Yeah, it's my biggest gripe, I think, about the system. Other than Glory was just, I don't know.
Glory felt weird.
Yeah.
So I will admit we did one thing horrendously wrong in the game. At no point did I properly explain to you guys, or did we use Wrath?
Yeah.
Which is where you can just be like, and here I find a las cannon that one of the dudes was carrying or was like supposed to be stocked. Where you make narrative declarations and shit.
Here's go ahead, sorry.
Glory definitely felt more like a combat thing than it did anything else. I'm gonna be real. Because just being able to add one die or what have you made it very. I think it's supposed to be like used very frivolously and gained and lost quickly. But
So-
we didn't, because that kind of goes against the general like feeling as we've developed as RPG players.
Here's my thought on. I like the concept of saying, hey, here's a system in place that way you can sit there and add narrative compunctions. If that is an option, you are actively making it more difficult for either the GM or the players to appropriately use that system in shorter adventures. Since Wrath and Glory were separate, they didn't share the pool, so their purposes weren't put together.
Yeah.
Because Wrath is primarily a narrative compunction, we were playing through, spoilers again, Istvan. There wasn't a whole lot that we were going to be able to just pull out our butt. We weren't going to be able to, could we have done things? Yes. Would they have made narrative sense? But, that would still be in line with the Warhammer game. Is this like suddenly fucking Gilliman shows up?
Well, I mean, it doesn't even have to be that big. You could have been like, the astropath is a loyalist. He's just fucking being threatened, and that can be a narrative declaration. Or I find a box of Kraken rounds that one of the Marines we killed was carrying because we were going to kill Marines. There's stuff that is on a scale that you can do.
Yeah, I think the bigger thing, particularly on Glory, is that it wasn't super clear everything we could do with it. Some of the stuff we could do with it did not feel very impactful. Like adding a die, on a lot of the stuff we were doing, wasn't going to make a world of difference or anything. And there also wasn't anything in the system to actively encourage continuous spending so that it is a constant give and take.
Yeah.
For example,
another thing
Story Path, they have a mechanic called momentum. They explicitly tell you you're supposed to use this. You're not supposed to hoard this and dump it all on a roll. You're supposed to use it as you feel it's needed. And they even add a mechanical reinforcement for using it, where if you used half of the momentum pool at least once, in the game, everybody gets a point of experience at the end of the session. So there's encouragement for using it. Now, do I necessarily feel like you need to reward players with XP for engaging with the system? No, not really. But the idea of here is something to reinforce the idea, hey, use this. Like, it's meant to be spent, not hoarded. Because that's what happens with a lot of meta currencies in these types of games is players don't want to spend them. They want to hoard them until they need them. Because what if I spend it now and then I don't have it later? Well, if you increase how often the players get it and then encourage them to use it, they'll be more willing to use it. Because now they know, okay, it's okay to use it. I'll more than likely get more later. And there wasn't a lot in that way. And part of it might have been just because we were playing higher power characters. We didn't necessarily feel like we needed to call on it that often.
Yeah.
That's fair.
But like how did it overall feel to run the game?
Honestly, I enjoyed it. It wasn't too hard or overwhelming or what have you. The example characters that they have or enemies they have are like laid out fairly well. They have clear rules for advancing or de-advancing enemies across tiers, which is super nice. I didn't have to fiddle around with any like super fine minutia, like are you guys going through the rain and there's a little bit of rubble making it only slightly difficult ground on a Tuesday while the sun is out. Like it was fairly simple, and it gave me enough groundwork that I could narrative what I needed without missing mechanical crunch. Like as a what was it, chewy system, it did very well.
Chewy feels so much more fun to say than midcore.
It does.
Yes.
I hate that it took me this long to fucking think of that.
But Ollie, so you have more experience in these RPGs than I do. How'd this feel comparatively?
In an overall sense, I would definitely say that my experience with Dark Heresy and even Rogue Trader and Death Watch, I felt a little bit more at ease to be able to switch into the flow of Wrath and Glory. My biggest gripe is the fact that compared to some of the Final Fantasy flight games and rule books, I had to do a whole lot more flipping back and forth between source material.
Yeah, ultimately the layout's meh.
And then having to do that across multiple books.
Right.
Yeah.
Plus the fact that there's one source book that has these rules for this part of my character, because I'm playing Astartes human Astartes human Imperium, and I had to Adeptus Mechanicus.
Well, you're playing Astartes Imperium. They do very well to like human and Space Marine are very different in species.
Yeah.
Right. But Astartes Imperium and Adeptus Mechanicus, I had to flip through at least the 3 primary books for those keywords more so than I did in Dark Heresy. And it's flat book.
And
I get that.
Then, like, not having to do that, I didn't run into an issue similar to that. But I was also playing a very simple-minded character. That being said, it is interesting to note that despite playing Unga Bunga, the melee character, I did not feel like a hammer. I did not feel like a thing that would be utilized to solve a bunch of problems, even if I shouldn't have been. Very much a scalpel. And it's weird. For instance, you don't send the scalpel in to try to fight 3 people at once, despite the fact that the scalpel wants to do that.
Yeah, because in a weird way, the most lethal options you guys had was melee. A chainsword was so much better than a bolter, just mechanically.
This is true, but half of our party was running around with capabilities and even just weaponry.
No, but I mean, like,
just didn't care.
Between the AP and the base damage, like a chainsword was on par with your Las Fusil.
Well, that's great. The issue is that it's melee. The fact that it was on par actually makes it worse because I have to get to them. And because I have to get to them and they go, well, I'm not going to stab you with this knife. You're in short range, bitch. I get a bonus to rapid firing your ass.
Yeah.
And my character would just get chewed up. But then you send in the, what was it at the end? Dreadnought?
Yeah.
And the melee character got to shine because of parry. Which is part because you can't parry bullets, chuckle fuck. But I can definitely. Was it a power fist it was using?
Yeah, it was using a dreadnought power fist essentially.
Yeah. So one of its 2 attack options were limited, and then I just had to not get shot 5 hit.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was just like, hey, that big thing, go take care of it. But the moment it was just like, hey, there's a number of enemies, you might as well just be dead man walking. Because I took more damage in the fight against the multiple Marines that just shot the shit out of me compared to that of the Dreadnought. Can't say the same for my teammates.
Yeah, I think now we haven't published that episode, so I haven't been able to re-listen to it, but I think you took more damage from the dude with the chainsword just ripping at you. Which is why I say, like, melee is a lot more threatening, and that's sort of what turns you into a scalpel, I think, because if you go up against 3 melee dudes, just by virtue of melee being lethal and them having more action economy, they could tear you up.
Yeah, I think the reason why that individual did more damage at the time was because I rolled poorly on my determination.
Very possible.
Because it is me and I roll dice badly.
And you roll dice
even
like
ones
ass.
that I don't physically touch. But did you guys feel? Did you guys feel that your ranged was, effective?
No, not at all.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, no. It very much.
Ignore bait bombing into something.
Yeah, it felt very effective. I think my biggest gripe about the range is I just didn't get to try enough toys. But that was just the situation our characters were in. Wasn't exactly a plethora of weapons available. So yeah, no, I think shooting felt great. I raised the brow at no inherent AP on a bolter, and I do think brutal as a keyword is a little annoying. Changing damage values on your ED is a choice. Not the end of the world, but it's kind of annoying when you have to sit there and remember, oh, these values give you an extra damage. Oh, but if you have brutal, they actually give you this much. I was like, okay. I feel like there could have been a better way to go about this, but all right. But no inherent AP on a bolter was something. And from what I understand, that might be more in line with the actual tabletop now, but you sit there and you look at the description of a bolter and the standard ammunition it has, and you just kind of want to look at the book and be like, you're telling me this doesn't have AP?
Yeah.
Do you understand what AP means?
I mean, I'm pretty sure it is in line with the tabletop, but like I have always felt that is weird. I get the tabletop is like, we don't want to make Space Marines too good of units or it breaks the balance. Therefore, we have
a reason to buy Primaris.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's a grenade launcher that is its entire point is to penetrate armor before exploding. Like, of course, it should have AP.
Yeah.
It's what makes the bolter a bolter.
Yeah, other than that little nitpick, because it's fine. The bolters are still good. They're not, non-functional because they don't have AP. It's just a weird thing of like, man, give me at least one so I could tell myself I have AP. But yeah.
So I can sell myself that sweet lie.
The tabletop does, or the RPG does ascribe to the same logic of the war game where everything can potentially wound everything for the most part. So there might be some things where it's not the case, but it does kind of feel that if we throw enough things shooting at this thing, we will eventually kill it.
Yeah, with
Just
the
may not be
exception,
fast.
With the exception of critical hits, I thought it did actually very well of separating out like these are normal human with normal human weapons. You could walk up to them, and the worst that you'll get is a little tired.
Yeah,
because like the first tutorial combat was you guys fighting what is essentially like a tier 2 cultist leader, a bunch of them, and there was just no way they could injure you unless they rolled like all sixes and you guys ate shit on your determination rolls.
I suppose that's
they used
fair.
They used salvo. They tried to coordinate fire. They mag dumped. They did everything they could, and that like, I think the only person who really even worried about it a little bit was Harkin, and he still just determinationed it.
and
That's fair.
Yeah, it's to a degree. If you don't have the right tools and skill, like a rank 1 character is not going to kill a rank 4.
Yeah, and then when I threw you guys against the Dreadnought, like it had enough tankiness, even with your guys' like souped up guns and the AP that it had. It was just taking like ping damage.
Souped up guns, sir. I had Kraken rounds.
I'm talking about the last few Sil plasma bullshit.
Look. That's why I had a weird thing about having to do multiple attacks, because plasma on my last Facile on a tabletop 40k sense probably should have done a little bit more.
I mean, but yeah, ultimately this isn't the tabletop, so
right. Wrath and Glory sense, I can kind of see where they're going with it. But it did feel kind of weird with at least some of how, especially plasma worked against the Dreadnought.
I actually thought the Dreadnought fight went pretty smooth myself.
Oh, overall, no, it weren't perfectly fine as far as my perspective as a player went. I just, looking at it from the 40k tabletop standpoint, seemed kind of interesting with how plasma worked.
Yeah. But, that said, I will argue. I think that Salvo needs to be reworked or changed or something, because as it is, it's just trash. It's trash as fuck.
Yeah.
It could be better.
nothing you guys had above like Salvo 2. And let's say I'm playing a normie human. I'm like tier 1. I have 2 ballistic skill and 3 agility, maybe. That 2 dice is not a whole lot, especially when it means I have to spend time to reload afterwards.
It's not a whole lot, but if you're throwing 5 or 6 dice to shoot, that's a third of your die pool you're getting.
Yeah.
But as
like,
a Space
how
Marine
it
that was
does-
throwing 15 or 16 dice, it is fucking nothing.
Yeah,
So-
but with how ED works and defense and whatnot, let's say I'm rolling, that half of it because, or a little more, like 2/3 because of how the system works in general. Even on that like 5-6 dice, I'm gonna end up getting 3-4 hits, which is going to beat most people's defense. Only like then half of that is going to get and end up being, or none of that generally is going to end up being ED unless I get really, really lucky because of how you can only shift Exalted.
And
I
since
have to
Exalted
rely on
counts
getting
for
a bunch of
2,
sixes.
yeah, since Exalted count for 2, it's sometimes that just isn't an option because you could literally
Yeah.
go down. You could literally be off by 1. That happened.
Yeah, I mean,
several
you guys
times.
were rolling pretty large amounts of dice, and you still only occasionally got Exalteds you could shift.
I think this would be a good point to transition into what we would improve about the game. And I would say the big thing would be to clean and clarify. A lot of things need to be cleaned up in the book, layout wise. Some of the wording is a little weird. So clean and clarify. Super useful thing to do. Highly recommend it. It is a underrated aspect of editing. Make sure to do your C and C, people.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that Salvo should maybe be Salvo and or like weapon firing mode should be a little bit more thought over. I think that there should definitely be like an amount of attacks you can do with a weapon or what have you, depending on what the weapon is. And that might help fix the dual wielding / weapon being better than another in any situation issues. And then also maybe make Salvo a little bit more valuable. Because just I'd have to play a tier 1 game because maybe I'm wrong and maybe it's perfectly good in a tier 1 game. But like once you start hitting mid / late, it's a mechanic, one of the few mechanics that doesn't hold up at all.
Ollie, Zimian, thoughts? Anything else you'd like to improve?
I think the death of the Imperium default. Chaos deserves to rise to the forefront. I would have liked this book a lot more if there was actually chaos options in the book.
I have a question. Actually,
Yeah.
Are there gene stealer options?
They have them as enemies. They even have enslavers as enemies. It's weird. But I don't think there's NIDs. Because they're kind of just general enemies. There's no working with a NID. You can have an orc freebooter. You can have an Eldar Corsair that decides to hang out with you. But like, a gene stealer is always going to want you to just get.
Well, the question is if there are gene stealer options. If you wanted to do a gene stealer game.
Yeah, because the reason why. The reason I asked that because I started thinking about this when I was mentioning the multi-attack. It's like, what happens if you had multiple hands? What if you were a gene stealer? How the fuck does that work?
I don't believe that Gene Stealers are a playable option. They are just an enemy, but they may have rules for that as an enemy.
Yeah.
If anything, they're probably in another book.
You know what? I have the book open right now. Give me a second. I will bestiary. Gene Stealer threats. Core book.
Neat.
Flurry of Claws. All as individuals in a mob of Gene Stealers target the same in opponent. They gain +2 bonus dice. Second Strike reduces the multi attack penalty by 2 difficulty number. As though it had the dual wield trait or talent.
So just
having 4 arms essentially gives you free dual wield.
Yeah. Neat. That's boring as fuck. Fix that. Ali, did you have anything that you'd want to change that hasn't been mentioned?
Honestly, not really. But then again, it's just one of those things of like, I kind of feel it. It's kind of like Shadowrun with some of the character builds I do, even though I do generally play an adept of some sort. Having to switch back and forth between source books. With trying to figure out how certain keywords and abilities work in Wrath of the Righteous.
You mean Wrath and Glory?
No, he's making comparison.
Yeah. Shut up.
No, I don't think he.
I think I've had more drinks than you have, Brandon.
Double down.
There's working hours. Gotta pump those numbers up.
How many drinks have you had in just the last hour, sir?
3.
I'm pretty sure I can at least double it.
Jesus, calm down. Either way, go forward.
No, but yes. In terms of just how Wrath and Glory works, some of the keywords, some of the abilities, and some of the things I always had to double check while you were in session for Wrath and Glory, especially because this was a one shot, so it was one of those things where I didn't really take some notes or at least plan too much ahead. I had to travel across different source books to make sure my rules, or at least the interactions I was doing, was more appropriate for the game.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? Now that Ali speaks, that gives me another idea of something that I wish could be improved upon. Make augments better, you cowards, or give us more of them, because there was few that felt very impactful. Like, because the Medicaid, it let you test quickly, but it also just only gave you like 1 die.
Yeah. Healing felt rough. It felt like it wanted you to get your ass beat and then be benched. Which sucks. And I think that should take us to the next bit of games we would suggest. I will say that I want to go first on this, primarily because I think I'll have the smaller list. If you're wanting to play another 40K game, I don't really have much in the way of suggestions because I haven't played a number of them. I would just, steer away from anything published by Fantasy Flight. But that is a personal compunction that is not based on any experience. So take that suggestion with a grain of salt. However, if you are looking to play a space adventure fantasy, there's Eclipse Phase. You could do worse than Eclipse Phase. If you like things being a little odd, and I'm going to give an answer that might make someone sigh, you could always play Traveler.
Not familiar.
No size here.
I'm shocked.
I think Traveler is a valid. Like, here's my thing with Traveler. If you're okay with not a lot of mechanical character progression, Traveler is a decent option. Most of the developmental progression for Traveler is more about resources, status, so on and so forth. It's not as much about increasing your skills and your abilities and such.
All
But
right.
that is my it's two items that say I'm telling you that you should try, and then a plethora of options I'm telling you not to touch. That being said, I will not be listening to my own advice fully. Different conversation. Next.
Staying in Warhammer. Obviously, I haven't tried. What was it, Imperius Maledictum?
Imperium Maledictum, yeah.
Imperium Maledictum. I haven't tried that yet. I want to. I have heard good things about it, at least.
And I would agree.
If you gotta touch one of the older Warhammer tabletops, I kind of suggest Only War or Dark Heresy Second Edition. Older than that, and it starts getting pretty janky.
Oh yeah, I did do that
Yeah.
Only War short adventure.
Yeah, I
You
also
did
played
do
Only
that.
War a little while back.
In
That's
an
cool.
overall sense, the Only War does feel at least a little bit more less clunky than Dark Heresy First Ed and some of the splat that came out with it. Personally, I haven't actually had any Dark Heresy 2 games, but I did at least take a look into the book.
Yeah, for better or worse, Only War is a meat grinder simulator, so don't expect it to balance well after like 4,000 EXP, like late game stuff. And don't expect it to do social stuff well. The whole point is that war, go fight, go kill a thing, do it.
It is only war.
Aren't you in combat?
If you want more intrigue and whatnot, like doing exploration, I think Dark Heresy Second Ed is the better there.
Yes.
If you like space, Eclipse Phase is fun. It uses the same dice system, so it's easy to get the wrap your mind around if you're already playing the older Warhammer games. I haven't gotten to play it, so it's hard for me to vet it personally, but I have heard good things about Stars Without Number. Which is another general space thing. I think that's in line with this, my suggestions.
It's hard for me to make recommendations. Their 40K naturally has a very clear vibe, and there is not a lot of things that hit that vibe.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you want to do 40K vibe, but not necessarily 40K, maybe you have your own grimdark sci-fi setting with definitely not magic psychic powers. Looking at you, Space Wolves. And all of that. I know what I said.
They're the least psychic of all of the chapters and legions.
Then there are some things that attempt to emulate it. For example, I'm aware on Drive-Thru RPG, I do not know the name of it, but there is a book that is 40K with the serial numbers filed off. That is just kind of a setting thing. I think it's kind of under the impression that you might be doing something 5th edition with it, but it's mostly a setting book, so you could probably just take that and do what you want with it. I mentioned this to Brandon off recording at one point, but unironically, if you want to do your own setting but 40K vibes, I do think Story Path Ultra fits pretty well utilizing the scale system, because you could very easily sit there and say, here's what a normal guardsman does, and they're at like a scale 1 or whatever, and then you can sit there and say, and here's a Space Marine, and this is their might scale, this is that, and you can kind of do that across the board or however appropriate for your setting. There's a lot of flexibility there. I think it's very appropriate for that. As far as things that already exist, I can't think of anything outside of what's been mentioned that is specifically 40K. I know there was a Genesis homebrew, but I'm not really going to strongly recommend Genesis. More of if you already are familiar with Genesis and you like it, that exists. Knock yourself out if you really want to. If you're not familiar with Genesis, don't bother. Honestly. Yeah. However, if you want sci-fi things, but you want options to be able to adjust the dials on how grim and maybe conspiratorial and stuff things are, there's Trinity Continuum Aeon, which is very cool. It's by default a very hopeful setting, but you could easily sit there and get really grim with it, especially if you dig out the old first edition Trinity books. Kind of in the same vein of like sci-fi with a weird mix of things going on, there is the official Dune role-playing game that's out.
I'll try that at some point.
I built a character in that, but I didn't get to play it.
And yeah, sci-fi already for tabletops is kind of rough, but getting something close to Warhammer is hard. I think that's all I have for recommendations outside of just the existing Warhammer games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would like to ask, as we have made our recommendations for other games, Trash to Shelf. What's our where does Wrath and Glory sit on the scale for you guys?
Trash to Shelf. Holy shit. Tell me how you really feel.
On and on your shelf. Where does it go?
It gets a file on my computer.
It gets a file on your computer?
At a very least, mid.
Yeah, right. I'm kind of leaning file on the computer. I think the system is cool. I do get excited thinking about 40K games I could run. I do further that excitement when I know there's a system that can handle it. That said, this still isn't a system I'm chomping at the bit to run. There are other things that come before this. So, file on the computer. It is good to know it is getting a lot of support. There are a lot of extra books with more rules and options and stuff. But, it would probably be ranked higher if I was a super diehard. I want to do nothing but run 40K. But there are other things like Trinity Continuum that I'm eager to run that just are better, in my opinion.
Yeah. All right. Brandon, or you said file on your computer. Yep. Ali.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely mid, which would definitely fall on file on computer sense.
Mm-hmm.
Would I buy the physical book? Personally, no. Not unless, of course, I'm planning to run an in-person campaign or in-person sessions. Overall, though, definitely doesn't seem too bad. There's, as I kind of mentioned earlier on in the session of the recording, at least because I was playing Imperium, Astartes, and Adeptus Mechanicus, and having to flip between at least 3 different sources to make sure I'm understanding the different keywords that I had to deal with. That would be my major complaint.
Mm.
It's a little bit more egregious compared to Shadowrun, but then again, I've also had more experience with Shadowrun than Wrath and Glory, so there is a little bit of bias in that regard. But it's definitely one of those ones of file on computer sense, the mid-range instead of no, would not recommend, or 100%, let's go in, go do it.
All right.
So let me throw this out here real quick, and this is a thing for me. I typically, I'm not a massive 40K fan. I enjoy the idea of it. I enjoy the models. I'm very casual in that space. I enjoy learning about the lore because I, for the most part, enjoy lore.
Right.
However, this isn't unique to 40K, where if you tell me this is an IP for something else that we turned into an RPG, I've lost interest. I'm not super interested in playing that. I'd rather play the original concept of the game and not what is taken out of it. That is something that for me personally, I look at a game and I go, is this good because of the merits of itself, or is it good because it has some merits, but there's a lot of this pre-existing information that's attached to it? If you handed this to me and I had no idea what 40K was, and I had no investment in any Warhammer anything, I would look at this and go, this is an okay system. This is okay. Because
valid and fair.
And that's a common thing that happens with a lot of games that have an IP whose source material isn't already established in the role-playing community. And I don't want to use the word derivative because it's not. I don't think that's true. These games can stand alone on their own merit. For example, I know a couple people who play Dark Heresy have never touched the 40K Warhamming tabletop. And their introduction to the lore and the system and everything was Dark Heresy. Or no, not Dark Heresy, Rogue Trader. There it is. And I think that's a good thing. That means that to those individuals, that game stood out on its own. I don't think Wrath and Glory stands out enough as its own system without having the prior knowledge and backing of my time with the Warhammer space. So for me, that's why I want to put it in PDF. I'd be willing to download the PDF. I wouldn't be willing to download the book. I wouldn't be willing to buy the book.
You wouldn't download a book, would you?
I constantly.
I'd download a car. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Imagine not downloading a car if you could.
It's just an NFT of a car. It's not an actual car.
Oh my god, no.
All I have to do is convince some crypto bro that it's actually worth something.
You could do it twice. You would just, make multiple of them. This one's red. This one's blue.
I know what NFTs are.
Yes.
Yes. Especially the concerned apes. If you are a crypto bro and you feel attacked,
good.
I'm not sorry.
Yeah, I'm not going to apologize.
She just lost all of our Russian listeners. What about you, Damiani? I think you might be a little more attached since you did run it.
Yeah, honestly, I'm gonna be real. I really like 40K. I like the lore. I like the tabletop, like the war game. I enjoy 40K in many capacities. Its RPG is probably the aspect I'm most fascinated with, and yet also it's an aspect that has been absolute fucking trash for a while. I'm gonna be real. I like Only War, but I think that's more of the same reasons you are okay with this system. Because it's what's there. If it were not 40K, I probably wouldn't play it a lot, if at all. Same with the other FFG games. This one's the best one I've experienced so far, and I had a good time playing it. I think I'd put it on my shelf. It's obviously not the best system I've ever had, but it's tolerable. It's not bad. I think that the Wrath and the Glory mechanics, even though they could probably be implemented a little bit better, to provoke people to actually using them, are interesting. I'd love to explore it more. So like, it's gonna go on my shelf, but like, it's gonna go on like my mid-lower shelf, one I'm not like staring at all the time.
Not one that you turn to and nod your head and smile.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that about does it. Any final thoughts on Wrath and Glory?
Not particularly.
No.
I don't think this will be the last time Wrath and Glory is on the pod. I have some ideas. No idea when. Not confirming any upcoming campaigns, just that I am looking at it for doing something in the future.
Let me beep boop.
Zach, I'm telling you this for your own health.
Mm-hmm.
You have 5 other games planned.
Dude, that's my brain.
That is a Semyon for you.
It bounces around on a lot of different things. I only tell you all about the ones that I have a lot of ideas for. And only actually line those up for the pipeline when we're approaching that time. And I'm very confident it's going to happen. There's a lot of ideas y'all don't know about.
Just in a corner, in a straitjacket, just rambling and use this system to do this.
Yeah, dude. A lot. There's an
You
entire
need to get
portion of
help.
my brain partitioned for that.
We'll get you the help you need, Semyon. Right behind this back out.
I am the help I need.
I am the knight.
Yeah. I'm just putting it out there. I have a couple of different ideas of things that I would like to do with this system, but it could be a year or more before that happens. So I'm not confirming an upcoming game or anything like that. Just I'm positive it will return to the podcast at some point.
Well, now I'm excited.
What about you, Ollie?
I mean, Ali gave his opinions.
I don't know if you had any final thoughts.
Fair. Doesn't Ali ever have thoughts?
It depends on if he's on a shelf or not.
Terminally orange.
Terminally orange, or if his mic has now become
Crapped
deceased.
out. Yeah.
You're like, I do in fact think he's dead.
That's an oof.
He is trapped in the box. Well,
there's no getting out.
He is in Fort Asshole.
Yeah.
God. Well, sans any final comments, I want to thank everybody for listening to a review here at Actual Play Broadcast. Join us next time as we tear apart a Fantasy Flight game.
I
don't know what I missed.
There'll be maybe a little bit of tearing into it, but I think it has some interesting ideas and some good thoughts. But that's not even going to be next time for them, because it's probably going to be like Horn or something next time for them. It'll be like the next time or something like that.
I don't
will
know.
say
I don't
this.
know if I want to subject people to making hard characters.
I will say this because this is going to be coming out at a relevant time because this is coming out after all the other recordings. I will confirm we are doing a short Curseborn actual play. Probably be about 4 or 5 sessions coming soon. We'll be recording that soon, and that should be coming out soon as well. That's not going to be kicked down the street for a release date.
No.
We're going to get that recording out as soon as possible along with a review, because if you don't know, you will have missed the Kickstarter by the time this comes out, but that does not preclude you from being able to pre-order it if you like what you hear and see when we play it and review it.
Yep.
And if you don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, go look it up.
Stay tuned.
Yes.
Yep.
Don't touch that dial. But thank you everybody for listening. Have a wonderful night, and bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I think that went well. Oh.
I made a bit of a fucky wucky there.